Hello, family members. I hope you're having a nice day today. This is a message for the people of the West, the United States and many of our allies who may not quite understand what exactly is going on in Israel and in Gaza and the West Bank right now, and not really understand where all this like pro-Palestinian passion is coming from, and feel like the subject is like way too hard to try to get into. And I get that. I understand. I felt that way for a minute too after October of, what is it, almost 2 years ago now, when the whole Hamas attack happened. But, I think it's past time for all Westerners to understand the very basics here. The Jewish people are a kind of complicated topic to talk about, right? Because Jewish people are both an ethnic identity and also religious identity. People can convert to Judaism. For example, Adam Sandler's wife converted to Judaism when she married him because he's Jewish. And that's not necessarily all that uncommon. There are people who are ethnically Jewish that are non-practicing, that don't follow the religion. And so right there, already, it's a fairly complicated topic, right? And then throw in the fact that Jewish people, historically, from thousands of years, have been a people without their own country. It's not like Spanish people who have Spain, or English people who have England. They had no specific land to call their own many times throughout their history. And so they have been a minority, a diaspora spread between many other countries where they are dealing with other people who are in the majority, some of whom like to scapegoat Jewish people in order to, make political progress and gain power, just to make themselves feel better about themselves. Any number of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people are anti-Semitic, and the Jewish diaspora has been a convenient scapegoat for a very long time. And in I think it was post-World War I days, a movement in England called Zionism became more and more powerful. And what these English Zionists wanted to do is they wanted to create a Jewish state so they would have a place to send all the Jews in England to, because they wanted to get rid of Jews. The very root of the Zionism that eventually led to the creation of Israel was based in that very racist, anti-Semitic, English desire to expel the other. So, a lot of people think of the current conflict as something that is contiguous over thousands of years, and it's not. It's like 100 years old at most. So there's that. But Zionists are people who believe that there should be an ethnically Jewish state. And there are Jewish people who are Zionists, and there are Jewish people who are not Zionists. There are Israeli people who are maybe less pro-Zionist, but because they live in Israel, there must be at least some level of Zionism that they espouse, or they wouldn't live there. However, the Jewish diaspora and in other parts of the world, it's really a case-by-case thing, whether or not they support the idea of Israel existing or feel any connection to Israel. And that is one of the biggest anti-Semitic talking points that we've seen for decades now, is this idea of Jewish people having a dual loyalty to whatever country they're actually from and Israel. And in some cases, that is true. You have your Ethan Kleins and and his wife Hila. They are Zionists. They are Jewish. They have that dual loyalty. They're both American and Israeli and have a connection to both countries. But there are a lot of Jewish people who are in other countries other than Israel that very much do not believe in the continuation of this apartheid state. Because at the base of it, in order to have a Jewish state, you have to have some way to keep people out who aren't Jewish or disprivilege people who aren't Jewish. And the only way that you can really truly do that is through violence. And so there are people like, say, Sam Seder, who are Jewish and very, very anti-Zionist, because they see this apartheid state, the state that would privilege one ethnic identity over others, as an inherent moral wrong. And to be fair, that is kind of my position as well. I am very anti-apartheid. But at any rate, then there is a very intense, calculated movement trying to convince Westerners like myself that you can use Jewish and Zionist sort of interchangeably, or Jewish and Israeli somewhat interchangeably. And that is actually an anti-Semitic talking point. That is something that the Jewish leadership of Israel actually uses, because other countries' anti-Semitism, this great desire to have a place to send the Jews away to, that plays to the right-wing Israeli government, the current right-wing Israeli government's benefit. The anti-Zionist end to this conflict would be that there would be a coalition government that did not favor, Jewish people over any other ethnic identity. People kind of lose the fact that there are a lot of people who live in Israel who are not Jewish, and not just Muslims. They're Christians who live there too. And every single person in Israel and anywhere in the world deserves to have equal rights under their government. Should not be disfavored because of their ethnic identity. But the continuation of Israel, it requires that. We forget because we have been told otherwise, or it has been sort of presented otherwise, but Israel is a British colony. It's no different than Canada or Australia or United States or the Bahamas. All those places were places that were conquered by the British and then settled with other people who then displaced native peoples. This country is a continuation of the same colonialism that defined the 18th century, and that we spent, or the 18th and 19th centuries, and that we spent the 20th century kind of dealing with the fallout from, as the you know, British and other European powers kind of lost their vast empires, what we got instead was all this instability in places that they had conquered. Africa, for example, is really a good illustration of this. When you have different ethnic groups that were sort of forced into the same country just arbitrarily by colonizers, and then they have to try to figure out how to exist, you know, peaceably, it's not easy to do that. And when there's a vacuum of power, it's really, really easy for very unscrupulous people to take power. And what we're seeing right now is the same thing that's playing out in former colonialist locations, playing out in Israel and in Palestine. And it is extremely frustrating that it has taken this long, but I do honestly see people talking about this in a more honest way than they ever have before. And that does give me hope. You know, there are many people who are late to the party, so to speak, on this issue that didn't take the time to educate themselves and come to an informed conclusion. And they're realizing this is getting to a point, I can't ignore this. You know, I can't just check out and assume that that's too big for me to handle. And that's good. That needed to happen, honestly. It did. It's just a unfortunate fact of this country that, you know, we have a government that has spent decades trying to get people to check out of the political process. And it makes us much easier to manipulate. And right now, the Israeli government and their supporters, the people who take money from AIPAC and other pro-Israel sources, they are trying really hard to muddy the waters, to obfuscate what's happening, so that they don't have to make the argument that they are okay with apartheid, with a state that disfavors one ethnic identity over another. Even the two-state solution still creates two apartheid states, more or less, and that's not better, you know? There are people who are both Palestinian and Israeli. People are people. They're going to intermingle. Families shouldn't have to be torn apart. I remember when I was reading Trevor Noah's book, just it hitting me how fundamentally apartheid is flawed, because human beings just don't work like that. Yes, there are humans who are repulsed by the idea of fraternizing outside of their race, but there are a lot of human beings who are not like that. I mean, I may be a bit biased because I have a black sister-in-law, but I see, it's not an uncommon thing, you know, like, and you know, my African family from Zimbabwe, the only one, or actually the two children in that family that I believe have serious long-term relationships are both dating white people. You know, I mean, people are people. Like, our skin color or our ethnic background does not in any way, shape, or form define us. It does influence us, but it doesn't define us. And so the idea that you could create a state that is solely one ethnic idea or ethnic identity and have that be a just and free society is absolutely absurd. You know, it's funny to me that a place like Israel has universal health care and universal free college and a lot of things that they try to do to entice the diaspora to come live there. But they need our money to pay for their wars and their conquest and their quelling any uprisings. If their security is so tenuous that they are so dependent on foreign money, especially United States money, in order to be able to fund their military, why is it that they are doing all these things for their citizens? You know, well, the Jewish ones. Anyway, it's very interesting to me, you know. We are funding a society that is fundamentally unjust, that is using starvation as an act of war, which is a war crime, and there are certainly many, many other war crimes we could discuss in relation to this. They're doing everything they can. Anyone who is in that government is doing anything they can to maintain their seat of power. And when it comes down to it, I don't think this current war, this current incursion would be happening at all if Benjamin Netanyahu's political standing wasn't so tenuous. Like, the reason he's still in power all this time later is because he is being so aggressive in trying to wipe out all of the people of Palestine, and not just in Gaza. You know, the West Bank has been aggressively, illegally settled during all this as well. You know, it's not like that just has gone away. And so he is doing what he has to keep political power. And that makes the whole thing even more disturbing, because it means that we have children literally being starved to death, people being killed just trying to get a little bit of food and supplies to be able to survive another day. And they use that as bait to get people to come out in the open so that they can then assassinate them. And all of that is happening because one man doesn't want to lose his job. Wow. That's awesome. So hopefully the waters are starting to clear and people are starting to understand that this is something new, something horrific, and something that we have to take action on. It breaks my heart. It absolutely breaks my heart. And I am so sad for my country that it has been this craven and has allowed this horror show to continue all this time with our very explicit support as a country. And I feel like the Democratic Party is maybe starting to realize, yeah, that's why you lost in 2024. It wasn't trans people or any of the other scapegoats. It was the fact that the Democratic Party takes an awful lot of money from AIPAC and is fundamentally Zionist, and their base is not. So, love you, family members. The kid's coming back. Gotta go. Bye.